To order. First item is approval of the agenda as it's presented here. We have a motion.
Motion to approve the agenda is presented.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the agenda is approved. We also have next is the approval of the minutes from our October 11th meeting. Hopefully you've had a chance to read through those. I did. I didn't see anything. We have a motion to approve the minutes from October the 11th.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Okay, there's nothing under old business, under new business. The first item is a zoning text amendment, supplementary standards for private clubs, and Matt is going to talk to us about that, and he's already at the podium.
Good evening. Good to see everybody. As mentioned, this is a text amendment for our zoning code we've been petitioned by the applicant for Casablanca Cigar Bar to have a reduction in the distance requirement related to private clubs in the city of Hendersonville. So right now we have private clubs are permitted as a special use in the C1, C2, C3, CMU, I1, and PMD CZD district as a special use. So that means that they have to meet certain standards in order to be approved. They have to go to the Board of Adjustments, and the Board of Adjustment reviews whether they meet these standards or not. And the two standards are A, no private club shall be located within a 600-foot radius of another private club, and B, the parking lot for such facility shall be adequately lighted to provide security for its patrons. And so what is a private club? We have a lengthy definition here. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but essentially you've got an association that requires membership. And then there are specific activities related to the serving of alcoholic beverages and food, entertainment, things of that nature that are part of the activities within this place that is excluding the general public, but requiring a membership. So that's our local definition. The North Carolina ABC also has a definition for private bars and private clubs. They're very similar. But essentially, if you've got an establishment that's serving alcohol that is not a microbrewery, and your food, the receipts for food sales is less than 30% of your overall total receipts, then you have to be licensed as a private club or private bar. And so, and if you are one of those establishments, you're wanting to be established, you're also going to meet the definition for the city of Hendersonville. So you need to come get a special use permit along with your license from the state. And we currently have 4 that have received that special use permit from the city. The Tobacco Merchant on 4th Avenue West, which we'll point out here again in a second. Southern Appalachian Brewery had it, but because some rules changed related to microbreweries, it's no longer necessary, but they're on the list. The axe throwing establishment on Duncan Hill Road, and then the Brandy Bar in 7th Avenue. So when we're taking a look at those zoning districts I mentioned, which permit private clubs by special use, they're highlighted here in this map. And as we zoom in to the area where they're mostly concentrated, we see the C1 and C2 and CMU right there in kind of the heart of town. So when we take a look at an example, the 600-foot radius, so we have a private club right here on 4th Avenue. They are in a building which is, I guess, condominiumized within a larger parcel. If you do a 600-foot radius around this parcel, it extends out and covers, almost to the courthouse, almost all of downtown. So there could be no private clubs within that 600-foot radius measured this way. There is no specific language in our code on how you're supposed to measure. So if you measured from the front door, it'd be a little bit less than that. It would be difficult with the tools we have I'm sure we could figure out a way, but this is the simplest way, is to do it by parcel. And so that's the result we get without any further clarification or direction. Does it make sense to measure it that way based on whatever the intent is of the rule? That's for you guys to consider as well. The applicant is located, in this case, right here. And so if you go out the back door, you're literally across Wall Street from this property line. So, if it's measured, down walking around the block, it's going to be a lot different measurement than if you just go from property line to property line. So this gives you a big picture. What does 600 feet look like? What does it look like to have different ways of measuring the distance from one to another? That type of thing. And I can come back to this image as we get into some of the recommendations that have come up. So if we take a look at our comprehensive plan, there's nothing specifically that talks about, make the measurements for private clubs easier or anything that specific. But what we do have is a couple of points about infill development, encouraging infill development, reviewing zoning standards to enable compatible infill projects. The downtown core future land use talks about it being the center of retail, arts, and entertainment. And that's specifically focused on Main Street, 7th Avenue, and portions of Church Street and King Street. Restaurants are called out as a recommended primary land use. Restaurants is probably the closest land use that's comparable to a private club that we have that's mentioned in our comprehensive plan. It also calls out arts, cultural, and entertainment establishments. In chapter 4, under cultural and historic resources, it does talk about promoting downtown as Hendersonville's central gathering place and a focal point for niche retailers and entertainment, cultural, and civic uses. So we took this because it's concentrates around downtown, and the specific applicant is located in the downtown district. We brought this to the Economic Development Subcommittee of the Downtown Advisory Board last week. This group, this is us sitting and meeting. We had a nice little fire in the fireplace there, read some books. It was a really good meeting. The discussion that they were reflecting was that they really felt like there should be a lessening of standards, more opportunities, defer to any state requirements, and kind of get the local requirements out of the way to open up more and more opportunities. There was a healthy discussion on the history of private clubs and how we kind of got to this point. And so that was a really good discussion with people who had some interesting background on this topic. So that was a subcommittee. They made a recommendation, which I'll bring up. Then it will also be reviewed by the full Downtown Advisory Board tomorrow at 4 o'clock. So we couldn't get it in front of them before we got it to you guys, but we will take y'all's recommendation and relay that to them. And then Downtown Advisory Board and Planning Board, those recommendations will move forward with anything that's, we'll move forward with our packet to City Council. So the statement that came from that meeting with the Economic Vitality Subcommittee was that they were in favor of less restrictions for private clubs. There was discussion on the definition of private clubs, city ordinance definition versus North Carolina ABC definition, and more recently, the distinguished definition of private bar per North Carolina ABC. The subcommittee was in favor of a per block rule rather than a 300-foot rule. If a 300-foot distance measurement is used, the committee felt as though it should be measured by walking route distance rather than radius. And so where did the 300 feet come from? I'll hang with me and I'll bring you up to speed. Prior to that meeting, we had met as a legislative committee of the Planning Board, where we had 2 members, Bob and Neil here, met with staff to discuss this item and some similar concerns about it being overly restrictive, especially within our social and cultural centers of town. And so some recommendations came out of that committee as well. And so here I've combined It's got a little bit of a choose your own adventure. So what I have at the top of each A, B, and C, that's where changes are proposed. D is proposed to stay the same. So for A, B, and C, I've got the legislative committee, your planning board legislative committee's proposal. Under A, you have two other options. That comes from the Economic Vitality Committee. And under C, you have a second option that comes from, that also relates to a recommendation from the Economic Vitality Committee. So the proposed language change would be within the C1 Central Business Zoning District and C2 Secondary Business Zoning District, no private club shall be located within a 300-foot radius of another private club when located on the same street. So instead of 600, you've got 300. You also have this distinction that they'd have to be on the same street. So if they're not on the same street, then it wouldn't apply. It would actually be more linear than it would be a radius. In fact, assuming, street is straight. So that was based on the city block. The downtown blocks are 300 feet each direction in the central grid, 300-foot blocks. So the idea was essentially you would have one per block, either up and down Main Street or on each of the avenues, one per block. So this would definitely change and open it up a number of opportunities. In particular, the applicant would be permitted to get their private club license or special use permit from the city. The Economic Vitality Committee had an alternative, which was within the C1 and C2 districts, no private club shall be located within 300 feet of another private club. This then relates down to C, where it would go on to say the effect of such distance requirement will be determined by the distance measured along the shortest walking route from the center of the main entrance of any existing private club to the center of the main entrance of any proposed private club. So 300 feet by how you would walk. Under the other option, which would be the radius, the measurement clarification would be that the effect of such radius will be determined by the distance measured from the center of any main entrance of any existing private club to the center of any main entrance of any proposed private club. So a slight distinction that it wouldn't just be as the crow flies or in a straight line, it would be 300 feet along a walking route. They had also proposed that it just simply say within the C1 and C2 districts, no private club shall be located on the same block face as another private club. So you've got some options there. I do want to clarify that under B, it says in all other zoning districts where private clubs are permitted, either by right or as a special use, no private club shall be located within a 600-foot radius of another private club. So the 600 we have today would stay the same for C3, I1, etc. So that is the recommendations coming to you for you to discuss. I'm happy to answer any questions or bring up some maps and stuff. Sure.
Do we have questions for staff?
I do.
Go ahead, Neil.
Could you go back to the slide? Under C, would that eliminate the petition, today's petition? Because they're really only parts of a city block from each other, basically.
Yeah, I think we had measured it. I think if you measured it that way, definitely under 300. I want to say it was in the 200 range, and we could probably try to pull that up and make that certain. But yes, that's a good point. Yes.
600 feet seemed relatively arbitrary to begin with. And I'm sure that there's was a rationale when they came up with it to start with. Hendersonville is really fairly dense and really fairly small. So, if you don't put them in the same block, no big deal. But having one on either corner of the same block, not so good. But the actual footage, if you put one on one end and you put one halfway down the next block, that going to meet the distance criteria? I mean, 300-foot blocks.
Yeah, so essentially it would be like if you are on one end of a block, the next one would be available at the comparable same end of the block on the across, the next block.
Okay.
Or if you're in the middle of one block, the next available slot would be in the middle of the next block.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
The only time that they would really potentially get close is if one was on an avenue and one was on Main, and they were right around the corner from it. Because then they would be on different streets, and that's assuming under either the first requirement, the 300-foot radius when located on the same street, or the third option under A, which would be that that no private club should be located on the same block face.
Okay.
So they could kind of come up to the corner towards each other. As far as the background, so we did some research and tried to figure out what the rationale was behind this. It was actually created April 19th, 1999. It was passed, it first came up, the BOA originally initiated the conversation around creating some standards in 1996. Planning board looked at it, made a proposal, included a 600-foot radius requirement from private clubs, also from churches, parks, schools, and it went to city council, and apparently it got tabled. It did not move forward at that time. And 3 years later, it came back up. City council then passed what was approved by the planning board. At that time, planning board was presented with the same 600-foot options. And ultimately, after discussion, the number went from 600 to 1,000 feet. So we had a 1,000-foot radius and the lighting requirement. And that was the standard starting in April 1999. 10 years later, an applicant was in a similar situation. They could not open their establishment. They were within 1,000 foot of another one. And they proposed to change it, to reduce it down to 600, which happened to be the same number that was originally proposed. And at that time, Susan Frady was stated that 600 feet is the distance from another private club located at 245 North King Street. She stated the existing spacing requirement was adopted in the 1990s, partially due to clubs opening downtown. She stated the Board of Adjustment recommended this distance due to a shooting at a club on Asheville Highway and separating like businesses. So negative activity happening around these types of establishments was, I guess, the rationale. I'll leave that at that. So with that, where does the distance become a correct distance? I don't know. It's been reduced from 1,000 to 600 previously. Now we've got some other recommendations for changing it again. Yes.
Did you say that the Economic Committee brought up the question, is there a need for any language about this? Did I hear that?
Yes, they did bring that up. I have contacted ABC. Nothing, I have not found any distance requirements from the state. I've emailed them directly, asked them that specific question, also asking them to send me all of their rules and regulations, and I haven't gotten a response.
Right. It seems like to me that, our values have changed somewhat with, this is all about alcoholic beverages, I presume, in private clubs.
Right.
And boy, has that thought changed around here, right? And now we have beer parlors on every second business, just about. So I'm going to bring up the question of why do we need 300, 600, next block, next whatever? Why do we need all this language that's a little confusing about how you even measure it? Are we inundated with private clubs? No, we have one, maybe two. And Sir Tom's, or whatever it's called now, the Tobacco Emporium, I think is what it's called now, is the one on King Street's gone. And this one wants to be maybe the second one now. So we're not inundated with them. So I am going to ask the question, what do we need all this verbatim language, verbiage, I mean. until we find there is a problem. Is there a problem? I don't believe there is a problem. I remember the shooting. That was on the way out on Nashville Highway. I remember that well.
Were there two private clubs involved with that?
In that shooting?
Yeah,
Well, no, it was where the Bay Breeze is now.
so it was one private club.
In the back of that, there was a private club in there.
Okay.
Legal or not, I don't remember frankly. But I was around for all the 600-foot business on this board, and it was very arbitrary. Where'd this number come from?
Yeah.
And there was no one within 600 feet of the applicant at that, or maybe it was 600, and that was just a number that stuck. But I'm questioning the need for all this stuff myself.
Is the Elks Lodge and the VFW, they're not private clubs?
They are not, they don't have special use permits, whether they probably existed before we required special use permits for private clubs, would be my guess, because they do seem to fit the definition that we've adopted.
Right.
That would be my only guess, because we don't have a special use.
If
permit.
it did, then you have things like the VFW, whatever, third or whatever that is, you know, now.
Yeah, and that was-
You know, there was no mention of those here.
Right.
This is from the city council in June 2019. All it says is there was a discussion of the American Legion and VFW, just like we're having now, just like we had at the committee meeting as well. No one really seems to have a real clear answer on that, whether they are required to have, or maybe were in place prior and grandfathered in prior to the need for a special use permit.
Is it possible to eliminate all this stuff? Can we do that?
And we just eliminate it?
Yeah.
Can you eliminate the requirements completely?
Say as per ABC requirements.
So certainly you could, you could do, you know, I think what maybe I'm hearing is that it would move from a special use to a permitted use. The supplementary standards would be completely stricken.
Yeah.
And it would still fall into the same zoning districts, C1, C2, CMU, others where it's currently allowed as a special use permit, it would move to the list of permitted uses.
When you say permitted, what kind of? permit?
Meaning just by right, there's no special requirements.
So there's no permit, no permit required. Just
Exactly.
do your thing.
Yeah. If there's no standards, then there's no reason for it to be a special use. There's no reason to go to the BOA because they have no standard to look at and say, does this meet it or not?
These places serving beverages have strict ABC rules. It seems to me that's adequate. That's
Less is more.
I thought.
And to your point, there's quite a few breweries now that have no distance
They're everywhere.
restrictions and yet the same capability of somebody.
Yeah, and there's more coming.
How does that?
Feed on an
30%
Appalachia.
food
That's the law.
Yeah, so the key difference there would be the ability to serve spirits versus microbrewery, you know, but you have high gravity beers and things of that nature. So I don't know.
So without this, they would, a private club or someone that was going to be a private club and serve bourbon without any restriction.
That's not accurate though. It's ABC.
They
It's-
have
it's still-
restrictions
right.
per the state law.
Any
So
liquor
that's what I.
Unless they're a restaurant, essentially.
ABC still restricts them,
Yeah.
but they don't need a license?
So
What is that?
if they serve food and they have receipts that total more than 30% of their total sales, non-alcoholic beverage and food sales equal more than 30% of their total total sales, then they essentially would be classified as a restaurant. They still have certain requirements they have to meet. They have to get a restaurant permit and all the rules under that, but they don't fall into the category of being a private club or a private bar under state requirements.
So if they have 25% and a food truck outside, and they still serve bourbon,
No, I think they would have to be a private club. They would have to have membership. They would have to, all the rules kick in if you're under 30%.
But then you have the ABC.
That's
permit.
ABC's on top of it.
Always have that if you're serving.
And their servers are have to go
Fortified.
through training and everything is
Okay.
regulated.
If you're under 30%, you have to be a private club and you have to have membership. You have to follow those different rules.
Well, that's what I was saying. So we're just talking about
Special
private club will exist, special use will exist, just the distance will be gone.
No, we're talking about.
Then you would only be left with the parking lot for such facilities shall be adequately lighted to provide security for its patrons and otherwise comply with section 613 above.
Right.
613 is the nuisance
Just eliminate
section that refers to lighting, I think.
Yeah.
Can you check?
That's the one question I wanted to ask. As far as the downtown committee, was everybody good with having private clubs and basically no parking in that sense? I mean, that would be just one of the questions that we.
Yeah, I think
Well, I know that, but
parking
as
for
far as-
downtown is something that they, focus on and are working on with the new parking garage and everything. I don't think they did. I think they saw that as a completely separate issue.
issues on that.
You're not going to put, right.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, just from a private aspect of, thinking of the Elks, how many people they can, obviously a lot bigger, but
So what did come up in our committee was that the difference between the C1 and even the C2, especially 7th Avenue, is that you've got, this dense walkable area. And the separation of use, it's a very urban area. You get out to the C3 and I1, and then you've got the separation of uses, a more suburban type of development pattern. So the 600 feet is going to come a lot easier because all the land uses are already spread out. So a big difference in character. So that's why those districts were called out versus the other ones. I think that also could be the same related to the parking situation in those two different districts as well, distinctly different. 613 is our nuisance section, which is where our lighting requirements come in. So we've got lighting kind of covered in the very vague terms already elsewhere in the code. We know lighting is an issue. Lighting will be coming back up. We have a lighting ordinance update set for next month for this board. So if lighting for private clubs is a specific concern, maybe we look at addressing that or seeing if it's covered in what we're proposing for our lighting ordinance, which will be coming up soon.
Well, I'd make a motion, but I'm a little unclear how to deal with that.
But do we
Yeah,
have,
let's-
do we have anybody that wants to speak from either?
Yeah, we need to do a
tobacco
public
merchant or,
Okay, sure.
well, first of all, any other questions for staff on the board? Okay, do we have anyone here either from, the tobacco merchant or Casablanca? Is that the name of the? No? Any other private clubs that want to speak? Okay, then we'll open up public comment. What's that?
Mr. Fitch.
Yeah, if you're in this room and you want to make a comment, you can come up to the podium. If you're on the Zoom call, you can use the raise your hand feature and we'll unmute you. Anybody on the Zoom call there, Tyler?
No, Mr. Chairman, that's not.
All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment on this issue and have some discussion amongst ourselves, perhaps come up with a motion. John, I think you were
Well,
about prepared.
I need a little help from staff in a potential motion to do away with all the verbiage that currently exists. And if it's not, I guess there's an applicant who would like to move this along. This has to go to city council, I suppose, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so, you said that the economic committee is meeting tomorrow, whether we want to not finalize something today. I mean, I hate to delay the applicant though, frankly.
Well, it's going to be a text amendment. It's just going to delete a portion of the existing text.
Yeah.
So the motion is not really, it's to delete, right?
Well, is
Just 'cause
it- it's
doesn't
not
really-
all. It's
The
not-
300 is about as.
It would
random.
delete and it would move private clubs from being a special use permit to being a permitted use under the same districts where it's currently allowed as a special use. Is what I'm hearing, in order to basically eliminate the standards completely.
Yeah.
Any differentiation between a private club and a restaurant or retail or anything else.
There'll be a motion to delete section 16-4-20 private clubs.
Yes, and then to reclassify private clubs from a special use to a permitted use within the zoning districts where it's currently allowed as a special use. Or you could list out all the zoning
Are they
districts.
listed? No, okay. Just where it's currently.
And then you will still need to make reference to the comprehensive plan and the consistency statement, just like you would for a rezoning.
But the question or point, it seems like the 30% has some connection to people getting drunk or not, maybe have more food, they're going to drink less alcohol. There's a reason for that, and doing away with that requirement, I wonder if, and there might be a pill where the people have to meet that 30%, or they're sweating that 30%. Now they can just come back and say, well, I'll be a private club and don't have to worry about it at all.
No, it doesn't address that, right?
That's
Yeah,
not
so
in-
we're not changing the 30% rule is a state rule.
Yes,
Mhm.
that's not in the ordinance.
So essentially, if you get classified as a private club based on what your establishment wants to do and based on North Carolina state law, if you go into the category of private club, then you're also going to be categorized as a private club when you come to Hendersonville to figure out if you're compliant with our zoning ordinance or not. Currently, we say, if you're going to be one of those, you got to do these things. Now, what I'm hearing potentially be proposed is that if you're in that classification, only thing we're saying is you can only locate in these 5 districts or 6 districts. And that's it, no other requirements. So the 30%, that doesn't change. One thing to consider is in the C1 especially, and 7th Avenue, which is primarily C2, but CMU could also be in this conversation. Someone could go to a private club where maybe there's not a lot of food options. They can walk right outside and they walking distance to, I don't know, 35 restaurants. I don't know how many restaurants are downtown 7th Avenue, but a lot of food options within that distance, walkable. Versus maybe some of the other districts where I think you're making, your point is good, that there's a reason for these being categorized differently and being limited and restricted by the state. And it does have to do with liquor and less food options and what that does to your body. So something to consider.
But once you go over 30%, you're no longer a private club, you're a restaurant.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay.
Someone could easily just go into a restaurant and sit at the bar and drink liquor.
Right.
There's no real difference there. So
Am I hearing with the motion to change the distance, we still keep the parking part or just eradicate the whole thing?
So there's
Don't have a
a lighting requirement, not a parking requirement.
Oh, I
To
thought
light
it
the
was
parking
parking.
lot.
And the lighting, is going to be street lights in many cases here. If we're talking about downtown, there is no parking lots,
Well, as a commercial building, I mean, we currently don't have a very strong lighting language, but we will be addressing lighting. So if this would be a commercial business, they would have to meet our commercial lighting standards.
Wouldn't that be under their zoning anyway?
That would be, yes, correct.
But if this place, it's on Main Street or 4th Avenue, they're dealing with street lights.
That's correct.
What other lighting should be mandated for any place?
Well, this, as it reads today, is specifically calling out the parking lot. They want the parking lot to be secure and well
You
lit.
have a parking lot,
If you have a parking lot.
but if you don't,
Right.
seem to me it is what it is, street lights.
They probably should say, if the establishment has a parking lot, then
Well,
Sounds like John's motion though wants to do away with the distance. And this is a recommendation to city council so they can take it up at their next meeting. Can we just not recommend that city council do away with the distance in the ordinance?
it's still leave it as a
at
special
that
use
and
permit.
tie it to the comprehensive plan because we feel like it's going to benefit the downtown. In other words, do we have to come up with an exact? I think we could make that recommendation to city council and then in the meantime, perhaps you could work on the way it's going to be presented to them as far as a little more the verbiage, the exact verbiage.
So, I mean, with that, and this, it would help if this board feels that it should be a permitted use or that it still needs another step where these would need to go to the Board of Adjustments to get final approval.
No.
Is it a special use permit or is it a permit? I understand what you're saying. And I think generally, yes, we don't have to nail down all the language in your motion today. Give enough to it that staff can kind of know which direction to go moving forward with city council.
So does that help with your motion as well?
Well, he just went on quite a bit about some stuff that it should say, and it's not just do away with X feet.
Distance, right.
Yeah, it's a little more involved than that, apparently.
Make a motion to continue this till next time.
Well,
So it's,
I'd like to avoid that.
go ahead.
Agree.
But I don't think we necessarily, I think there's probably a reasonable amount of agreement on the board about which direction to move. Why don't we go on to the next item? We'll work on wordsmithing up a motion
If you can.
that we can bring back to you all as we get through some of the other items.
Excellent.
Sounds
Let's move on to the next agenda item then, which is a rezoning, a standard rezoning at, on South Allen Road, and Tyler is going to present this one for us.
Did like presentation. So good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board. The city of Hendersonville is in receipt of an application for an initial rezone or initial zoning application, a standard rezoning basically from the property owners of 0 South Allen Road. Now we'll go into what an initial zoning really is. The next slide. So the PIN is 9588-22-1126. The parcel is currently zoned Henderson County Office Institutional. The proposed zoning, the application we have is for C3 highway business. This one kind of differs from the other zonings we've had in the past. Staff also has a recommended zoning district that we'll go into in a minute. We'll compare and contrast those two districts. The total acreage of the site is 17.13 acres. Since this is a standard zoning, there is no use proposed or no use that can be tied to this specific piece of property other than what is permitted by right under the zoning classification. The parcel was annexed into the city on September 2nd, 2021. The North Carolina General Statutes 160D-202G provides that upon annexation, the county zoning will stay in place until the city zones the property or 60 days from the effective date of the annexation, whichever one is sooner. If the 60-day lapses without the city zoning the property, it becomes unzoned until the city zones it. So the subject property and the parcels to the north are zoned Henderson County Office Institutional and Henderson County Industrial. To the east, the parcel is bordered by I-26, providing the site with significant visibility from the interstate. Parcels to the east of the opposite side of I-26 are zoned Henderson County Industrial. The south parcels around the interchange of Upward Road and I-26 are zoned Henderson County Regional Commercial, City of Hendersonville C3 Highway Business, City of Hendersonville Planned Commercial Development, and contain various commercial uses. To the east, the subject property is bordered by two recently zoned planned residential developments, the landings of Flat Rock and the Waterleaf at Flat Rock. The landings of Flat Rock is a proposed development for a 153 bed facility with a mix of assisted living and independent living for seniors. The Waterleaf at Flat Rock is proposed to be a 263 unit apartment complex. Both of these projects establish the transitioning and intensity from commercial uses along Upward Road to multifamily extending up South Allen. As you can see on the left, that's the current zoning. The bluish color is the Henderson County Office Institutional, and the applicant is proposing C3 on the right, which is the orange color. The 2030 Comprehensive Plan's future land use map designates the parcel as Regional Activity Center. Parcels located to the north, east, and south are also designated as Regional Activity Center. This future land use designation is specifically concentrated in this area due to its proximity to I-26 and is intended for community and regional retail sales and services such as restaurants, multifamily residential, and offices. Parcels to the west of South Allen are designated as business center. This land use designation calls for employment centers developed in a campus-like environment is present at this location due to large undeveloped tracts in the proximity of I-26. The existing presence of the Blue Ridge Community College and the fact that it is naturally buffered from existing residential uses by the floodplain of Bat Fork Creek. The property is designated as Regional Activity Center on the future's land use map, like I mentioned on the previous slide. The goal of this designation is to meet the large-scale retail needs of Hendersonville residents while encouraging mixed-use walkable design through redevelopment and infill projects. Both the C3 and CHMU provide the framework to allow this parcel to meet the large-scale retail needs of Hendersonville residents. However, where the two differ is in regard to mixed-use walkable design. C3 does not permit mixed-use development due to multifamily not being a permitted use. CHMU allows multifamily by right, thus providing the opportunity to incorporate residential uses with commercial uses and achieving the vision for the Regional Activity Center. Additionally, the standards to encourage walkable design are integrated into the CHMU district design standards, while C3 has no design standards. One of the development guidelines for the Regional Activity Center future land use designation is the mitigation of bulk large-scale buildings through facade detailing and window coverage. This strategic vision is directly addressed in CHMU district design standards by requiring additional requirements for windows and building facades. There's also some design standards that revolve around activity nodes, like Matt mentioned prior to this meeting with the current planning subcommittee. The activity nodes are basically concentrated in interchanges, important intersections within our commercial districts. This parcel is partially in a activity node, while the remainder of it is abutting that activity node. So that's important to recognize. Activity node basically has design guidelines or design standards that go above and beyond the normal Regional Activity Center designation. So these are some existing conditions of the site. The picture on the left is looking to the south, I believe, towards I-26 and the Holiday Inn on that side of the property. Looking towards the north, or on the right-hand side picture is looking towards the north to the existing trees on the side, and that's also where a creek runs around that side of the property. So as you can see, the property has been used for agricultural uses. It's vacant and fairly flat with pretty high visibility from I-26. So staff analysis, staff recommends that this parcel not be rezoned to C3 highway business. Staff recommends that this parcel be zoned CHMU commercial highway mixed use for the following reasons. Previous planning board and city council actions. I'll go into those in more detail here in just a second. Comprehensive plan consistency and the compatibility of surrounding land uses, to mention those two large scale multifamily developments that were recently approved. Commercial highway mixed use was created 4 parcels along the Upper Road corridor that were annexed into the city for sewer service. So I'll go into this. And 2010, Henderson County Board of Commissioners voted against the city of Hendersonville extending its extraterritorial jurisdiction, or ETJ, into the Upper Road corridor. Although the extension of the ETJ was turned down, the city maintained a goal to manage the growth pattern in this area due to anticipated development pressures and subsequent requests for sewer connections. On December 2nd, 2010, City Council agreed by majority consensus to direct staff and the planning board to continue developing the commercial highway mixed use, or CHMU, zoning district classification in compliance with the Henderson County Land Development Plan, and to examine the utility extension agreement and make provisions for property owners requesting sewer service to meet the city's requirements for that area. March 3rd, 2011, city planning staff brought forward a proposal for the creation of the commercial highway mixed use district. Planning Director Sue Anderson explained that the intent was to apply the zoning classification to properties in the Upper Road area that wish to annex into the city of Hendersonville in order to obtain sewer connections. The city explained the new zoning classification was closely modeled after the highway mixed use zoning district, which includes design standards for buildings and development sites. It was reported that the planning board voted unanimously to recommend city council adopt the ordinance enacting the CHMU classification. The city council created what is called the Upper Road Planning District in line with the city's sewer extension policy. A map of the Upper Road Planning District is shown on the screen. The parcel in question is highlighted in red. It's kind of hard to see on the screen, but you can kind of see the black outline that goes through the planning district's a little bit darker of a gray, or light gray really, and there's some darker gray down here. But the light gray is the Upper Road Planning District, which this parcel falls under. The subject property, or the Upper Road Planning District, is a direct reflection of the proposed ETJ expansion that was turned down by the Henderson County Board of Commissioners. So this planning district ultimately just mirrors exactly what the city wanted the ETJ to be if extended. CHMU was intended to be the primary zoning district in this planning district. So here's kind of a comparison between C3 highway business and CHMU highway mixed use. As you can see, there is 47 permitted uses that are allowed in both districts. There's 2 special uses that are allowed in both districts. C3 has 11 permitted uses that are not allowed in CHMU, and also 5 special uses. And as you can see, CHMU has 13 permitted uses that are allowed in this district alone, and no special uses that are not allowed in this district specifically. Some key differences we've touched on: there's no design standards in C3 highway business, and there's some particular commercial uses that could probably be seen as more intense, such as automotive paint and body work, food processing establishments, less than 10,000 square feet of gross floor area, microbreweries, and wholesale business. There is some key differences with CHMU. They do have design standards. Some of these design standards are building orientation, building facade detail, building scale, building materials, building offsets. It's also important to note that CHMU allows multifamily by right. So if they decided to do apartments on this project, they wouldn't have to likely go through another process. It's permitted by right. And permitted by rights also light manufacturing. So some of the manufacturing uses could be done by right under CHMU with those design standards met. I'm open to any questions you all may have.
Anybody have any questions for Tony?
Can you address outside storage in either of these 2 districts?
So outdoor storage is basically its own section of our ordinance. It is, you mean like, do you have a specific question about?
What, yeah, well, what can be seen outside, building materials, junkyard, I mean, not junkyards, but stuff. You know, I just want to know if there's a difference here in the two districts.
Yeah, so we have an overarching section. I think Matt's looking it up, but just in general, I think both are possibly allowed to have outdoor storage, but it has to be in the rear and screened. So I think they would fall under similar guidelines as far as outdoor storage is concerned. But
The rear could be along the interstate.
Yeah, how a person orients their building is determines where the rear is, correct?
yeah, well,
Or is it, if it faces a road, that's the front no matter what? Road frontage, not from the building. Well, that's what I want to know.
no. So, yeah, so Matt has the ordinance right here. So in C3, outdoor storage is permitted. However, in CHMU, it is not permitted.
But light manufacturing is permitted, which seems a little contrary to me
Mhm.
there, but, okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, so in all, the section 6-9 covers outdoor retail sales, outdoor retail display, and outdoor retail storage.
They're allowed in both retail.
So basically that whole section covers all the outdoor, like retail storage and all that kind of thing. But outdoor, they have their own calculation for light manufacturing.
Okay, well, retail goods, for instance, let's picture Bloomfield's across the way there. They've got a lot of outdoor stuff for sale. Is that allowed in C3 and is it allowed in CHMU?
It's allowed in C3, but not CHMU.
You could, okay. Thank you for that.
Any other questions for staff?
I'm just looking for, or from the 2010 perspective, I mean, are we kind of still on that same thought process? Or, I mean, with more growth kind of out on that upward road exit
So
coming?
most of the time when we have somebody requesting to annex into the city, it's usually falling in line with like the landings of Flat Rock where it's a planned residential development. So you kind of know what's going on when it's annexed. Very rarely do we get a parcel annexed and then we're kind of tasked with zoning it. The Dario property out there in front of
That
east
little triangle?
was basically the same. It's zone C or commercial highway mixed use. So in this scenario, staff just felt it was a better fit for this parcel, that given the close proximity to the planned residential developments and the mixed use notations in the comprehensive plan, that CHMU was the better option. And since those guidelines were already laid out by council,
It sounds like it's the most flexible, but it does have certain restrictions, particularly in design. So depending on what the recipient will do with it.
yeah, so there's definitely some trade-offs. There's some wider uses that are allowed by right with CHMU, but like you mentioned, there are some design standards that have to be met. So they're, like with anything, there's trade-offs to which one.
Is there a downside to just leaving it unzoned until they know what they're doing?
Can't.
Yes,
I think if the city doesn't do anything, it just goes unzoned.
that's true. but
Then anything goes.
There's a 60-day, I thought there was a 60-day.
But you said if they
There-
don't do it, then it just goes as unzoned.
So yeah, there is a 60-day time frame that we're supposed to have it have it initially zoned. So I think the idea is that the city have it zoned to something in that 60 days. It basically gives us that 60 days to figure out what we want that parcel zoned. In theory, it could go without being zoned. I'm not sure what that would look like. Eventually it'd have to be zoned something, whether it's tied to a project or.
But I mean, it doesn't hurt them and it doesn't necessarily hurt us, right? If you don't do anything.
Well, what if they put a pig farm on there? Or the dreaded asphalt plant goes there.
I don't think that they can. do that.
Well, they could do that if
Well,
it's
They have to get
unzoned.
it, they have to get it zoned at some.
Well, I
point.
guess the question is,
Yeah.
are there parcels within the city limits that are unzoned?
No, so I mean, just because it's unzoned doesn't mean they could use it for anything.
Right.
So they would have to come before us
I guess.
and get it zoned and be a permitted use in that zoning district before they could do
it.
anything on it.
Yeah.
However,
I was just gonna say, if the city has the ability to take some action and doesn't without some kind of really good reason, and we were essentially setting them up where they couldn't use their property, we'd be looking at a takings potentially. I'm not a lawyer, but there are some, we need to move forward with some zoning on this property of some sort.
Well, is the applicant going to speak today?
the representative from the applicant is
Let's
here.
let's see what they say.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, we have a representative for the property owner. Just come up and state your name and let us know your association and listen to what you have to say.
Thank you. Yes. Nice to see all your faces. You look like a capable planning board here today. My name is Kelton Lastine, and I live 275 South Church Street in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I've been working on this project for 5 years now. It's taken that many years to put these two planned residential developments together, which are quality development for this area. In 2020, we placed the assisted living on 8 acres. And earlier this year, we solidified the multifamily project next door. Both of these projects have direct access off of South Allen. And there's a portion in between that will turn into a private road that's being built by the owner themselves. That private road is also going to have city utilities run throughout the site, continuing on to the Holiday Inn Express. So I personally have worked with the owners, representing them as an exclusive listing agent, real estate broker with Land Partners, a group out of Tennessee, Bristol, Tennessee. And we have all intentions of working the rest of this project as we have the previous 5 years, with intent on quality and assurance that what goes here is going to stand up to the Flat Rock name. It has a 28731 address, as well as meet the needs of that South End community, which is Dana, which is underserved, which is Blue Ridge Community College students, the new manufacturing plant coming in. So there'll be retail uses or residential uses involved. But since submitting the application, I sat down with the planning guys and we had a long discussion about what the differences are, and I have my thoughts and they have theirs. And in representing the landowner, we feel it's a bit unfair to get design standards thrown on us. So the C3 seemed the best overall zoning for this property. And that's why I'm here today to share those thoughts. So the only security you have on this property, or the best security I can give you is my word and the future projects that are coming to this site, specifically picked and purposely.
We have any questions?
Just go ahead. You first.
Do you speak, this applicant of this piece of land we're talking about today is also going to be the developer of these other projects? Is that a fact?
There's no developer of this project.
No, of the residential places that were approved recently.
The landings and watermark.
Landings, is that the same applicant or is it a different party?
No, those are two new owners of the property. It was a 40-acre tract to begin with, and we've subdivided since then. The landowner is the one who I represent, and
of the backland.
Correct.
17 acres.
Which is only visible on the interstate at the
All right,
moment.
so you don't have a statement from those folks up front about whether they approve or disapprove of what you're proposing?
That's
You
correct.
don't have that.
This was, the site was the state made it, it was a state law that we had to get this annexed into the city once we placed the residential project. So that triggered this rezoning, and we have 60 days to get that going. Otherwise, the city's going to put their blessing on it and keep moving. And I'm here to try to protect the landowner and see what's best for selling and marketing this property.
And how long is your frontage on the interstate?
2,000 linear feet.
Long distance, pretty rare to see something like that.
Almost a half a mile.
Right.
Yeah. And yet your access is going to be over this private 2-lane road that you're committed to build previously. That's going to lead to this property, right?
That's correct.
All right. And you said a second ago, this could be commercial, it could be residential. The C3 is not, correct me if I'm wrong, does not allow by right residential. You'd have to come and apply for a planned residential zoning at that time. Is that correct?
So C3 does allow for single and 2 family, but not multifamily.
Okay. So that could maybe work against you later if it went C3 now. And presume you wouldn't want to build single family homes or something there on the interstate. But anyway, it seems to me that C3 is reasonable when you've got 2,000 feet on an interstate for people to see in there. Anyway, that's my question or comment.
Peter, you had a question?
No, basically John covered it, so we're good.
Anybody else have a question? I do have a question about one of the comments. Unfair to impose design standards. So we have a district, CHMU, that was established specifically for this area as properties were annexed, yet the property owner feels like it's unfair to impose those standards on them.
I'm making that statement, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. And
Is that relative to the possible future uses? You're going to sell this property to a developer or multiple developers, right? They're not going to keep it and develop it themselves. Am I accurate?
that's
You've already
accurate.
sold the other 2 parcels, so.
That's accurate. That's accurate.
Okay, so whoever buys the property, let's say it's zone C3, they're going to have to come back and deal with the gentleman,
Mhm.
whatever they want to do with it, not you guys. So you're looking to see the
Correct.
biggest, widest window up front before you sell off the property. Is that accurate?
That's an okay way to say a scope. Yeah, wide lens.
Who knows what the new owners are
right.
going to do with it,
Well,
other than what's permitted in the zoning.
with rezoning, we have to consider everything
yeah.
that's in that district.
Yeah. Okay.
So if the, whatever it is zoned, if the next project that comes along is less than 50,000 square feet, then they could do their project by right without having to come back to this board. If it's over 50,000 square feet, then they would have to come back through for the CZD process. If this property, 17 acres now, if it gets subdivided into smaller parcels, the likelihood of that 50,000 being triggered is very minimal. So getting the zoning right today is really critical. I don't think we can bank on it coming back and then saying we're going to get the zoning right under the new.
Through a
right.
CZD,
Right. So getting it done correctly now so that by right developments can occur on that property without having to come back to a rezoning. You make sure the zoning is correct.
So the only really difference though is the design restrictions going forward, one
some of the
zoning
uses.
versus the other zone.
And some of the uses. There were 11
Yeah,
uses
some of the
that were allowed in the CHMU, and then there were 13
Right.
uses that were allowed in the
Yeah, they were.
C3. Still, unfair about imposing standards in a district that was established for that area. I mean, and it's right in the gray. I mean, that's.
Yeah.
And how long have you been working on this? 5 years?
I mentioned 5. I did. Yes.
And he's only thinking about this now?
It was just annexed.
I could say the same about the planning department.
It was just annexed in September though. So that's why.
That's right. It's triggered.
I have a question for city staff regarding, we know that the one project, the
Waterloo?
Waterleaf only came before us last month. Has city council taken action on that?
They approved it.
They approved it, okay. So city council, so both of those properties have been approved for the PRD, CZD through city council.
There is. Landings is coming back.
The landings, I wanted to say lots, landings. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I
Mr.
wish,
Laston?
yeah, well, I wish that you had the blessing of your neighbors for what you're applying for. Planning department doesn't have the blessings of neighbors either for what they would like to see it. We're kind of just out here with who knows
Up to you
what the
all.
neighbors want.
Yep.
Those places don't exist yet that were just approved, of course. But I'm sympathetic to a property that's along a super loud corridor there. And if you look at the red items that are different here, to me, I don't see tremendous differences, frankly, in this. Design standards, well, who's going to be seeing this property? Well, people traveling down the interstate primarily.
Right.
So I'm not sure that's critical there. That's my opinion. I see some things in the CHMU that will possibly scarier to me than C3. And light manufacturing could be considered one of those.
What was that last one, John?
Light manufacturing. I'm not sure what that really entails, but that's just, sorry, I'm not sure. If it's all in an indoor building, perhaps that's just dandy. But if you look at what's allowed in C3, these red ones, not so horrendous to me personally. So they have applied for C3, right? That's the application. And that's what I'm personally going to consider. I was around when the CHMU came up and the planning board was not given a whole lot of options from the city at that time. It was county zone land. And we were told that that's what it needed to be. And C3 was not an option at that time for Upward Road. This was the option that was given and that's what went down. So
For zoning, rezoning a property, we need open public comment. Okay, we'll go ahead and do that. I believe at this time, unless there's more questions, Mr. Laston. Okay, thank you, sir. We'll go ahead and open public comment. Anybody in the room that would like to speak about the rezoning on this property, come up to the podium. If you're on the Zoom call, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you and listen to your comments.
Ken Fitch, you're unmuted.
Yes, Ken Fitch, 1046 Patton Street. Just a question. If this would be development by right, we might not know the density or the use, which might have an impact on the traffic on South Allen Road, which is an issue of concern to many people. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Fitch. So I guess what Mr. Fitch is speaking about there is what you were talking about, where it gets subdivided and then gets developed by right. Smaller buildings at a time. The only thing would trigger any kind of a CZD or special use type permit would be over 50,000 square feet under roof. Is that correct?
That's correct. So if it was zone C3, they'd be able to do any of those permitted uses. If it was zone CHMU, they could do any of the uses and would have to meet the design standards of CHMU. All right, without, and it would just be staff review and approval under 50,000 square.
Thank you. Any other discussion? John, I appreciate what you're saying about it being along the interstate and C3 being along a major corridor like that, but the CHMU was designed for this particular area.
all right, so I hear the application is for C3. Does the planning board have the right to modify, well, we have to deal with what they've asked for.
So first of all, I don't think there's anybody else on, so if you wanted to.
Oh,
close
yeah,
the
let's
public-
close. I'm sorry. Was there anybody else raising their hand? Okay, we'll close public comment then.
And then I think I heard a question about the authority. And so the city has the authority to zone any property in its jurisdiction, up or down. And that's a little different than the general public. General public can petition to rezone property, but they cannot downzone property without a property owner's consent. That does not apply to the city, to the municipality. So we have that authority to zone property. And in this case, we also have to refer to the comprehensive plan for consistency. And that's one of the handful of reasons that we're making the recommendation to zone it to CHMU rather than C3. There was a comment made that, planning staff doesn't have the blessing of the neighbors. We have the blessing of city council from the actions that were taken in the creation of CHMU. And then we also have, I think we have the comprehensive plan consistency, which is essentially like the guiding document for the city that was developed with public input. So I think, I just wanted to address that so that there's no confusion.
Is C3 not compatible with the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, so it does not meet the standards for the activity nodes, doesn't meet the standards for uses because it just, except for the single family and two family, that's going to be hard to do and create a mixed use area or mixed use development in particular. You could create a mixed use area that had, single family, two family in close proximity to commercial uses. In this case, encouragement of multi-story mixed use buildings with retail on ground floors and office, residential on upper floors.
Inside the activity node, there were design standards
Yes.
that.
Yeah, the placement of new
CHMU.
buildings close to the street, location of all parking to the side and rear, improved pedestrian connections. And so all of those are things that are more encouraged and are more likely to occur under the design standards of CHMU. Under C3, there aren't those standards. And what we typically find in the C3 district is a very automobile centric, large parking lots, lots of asphalt, not a place you want to walk. So then we take a look at the compatible land uses. If you look at the 5 or 6 criteria we use that you guys are tasked with using in evaluating whether or not to approve a rezoning or which direction to go with a zoning, compatibility of surrounding land uses is one of those. Traffic was mentioned as well. Traffic was mentioned as well by Mr. Fitch. And that's another concern, is that we want to create an area where people can use their feet or a bicycle to offset some of the automobile traffic within this area. So that should hopefully address traffic. That's more likely to occur under CHMU than it would under C3. I'm trying to go to the slide that lays out the criteria
I think with the
after the
other,
questions.
the other developments that are there, there's going to be such an increase in people that will be living there, visiting there, that the CHMU guarantees more or less, more walkable, compatible area for an additional 600 people, let's say. There's 245 apartments going up.
I'll only comment, and I don't disagree with the gist of some of that, but you can also have automobile sales in CHMU. So it's not, there's not going to be a park back there. It's
No.
going to be something.
But you can't build a building that doesn't have a change in the facade every 20 or 30 feet.
I'm sure the interstate drivers will appreciate it.
Or even the people
No one else
walking,
sees it.
people walking the area would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also thinking of the people who will be living at the landings or Waterley.
They might
They'll
see
be
it.
looking at,
Absolutely.
not just the interstate drivers. So, Yeah, I like what city staff is recommending.
Me too.
Mhm.
Just a quick note to John's point earlier. So the application is for C3. So in your motions, you basically have two options: approve or recommend approval for C3. The denial motion also has another section that's normally not in there that says basically I further move that the planning board recommends CHMU. So those two are the two options are laid out in the motions. So whichever option you all choose to go, the motion will reflect that.
Just one other question I have, when it was talking about was there a road design that was planned? I don't know, from the applicant that was going to go through that property now?
Kind of by the Bojangles there and
Mhm.
So it will be going
in
through.
the back way.
Yeah, so we've, especially with the Waterleaf property, we've saw where it's going to connect basically with the Holiday Inn property. And we've saw preliminary sketches of how it's going to feed into South Allen Road, but we've not saw or approved anything like.
But it is feasible, it's possible.
It is feasible. I believe that's the plan. They'll need that road to service the back lots.
All right, do we have a motion?
No, quick question, Tyler, if you don't mind. We don't need to formally deny the applicant, do we? We can just pass a motion for CHMU. That's a question, not a statement.
I believe that you are correct, that you could do that. We have the authority to do that. I think this is the cleanest way would be, we are going to address this application that is before us. And then we're also going to zone the property in a way that we feel like is compatible with comprehensive plan, compatible with surrounding land uses, so on.
Clean sounds good.
Can do, I'll go
Do
for
we have a motion?
Okay.
Go for it, Dan.
I move that the planning board recommends city council deny the rezoning of the subject property PIN 9588-22-1126 from Henderson County Office Institutional to C3 Highway Business for the following reasons. 1, the development is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. 2, the development is not compatible with the surrounding uses. I'm not going to go with the other 3. I further move that planning board recommend city council adopt an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city of Hendersonville, changing the zoning designation of the subject property PIN 9588-22-1126 from Henderson County Office Institutional to CHMU Commercial Highway Mixed Use, finding that the rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future land use map designation of regional activity center, and that the rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. That 1, that the zoning map amendment is consistent with the 2030 comprehensive plan, chapter 8, land use and development. 2, that the rezoning is compatible with the surrounding land uses. 3, that is reasonable and in the public's interest to approve the application because it will advance the goals related to the comprehensive plan.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. I do have a recommendation that we use the word rezoning instead of development. Agreed. In that, so that the rezoning rather than development, because we don't really have a development for us, we have a rezoning in front of us. So 1 and 2, is that okay?
Yes.
On your motion?
Amended.
Okay. We're going to use any other discussion? We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. We're at 5:20. Do we need to take a quick break? Are we okay? Good? Keep moving? All right, I'm good too. Item C, rezoning CZD site plan amendment for the landings of Flat Rock. Apparently this is right next door.
Yeah, we're going about 10 feet to the west. So the city of Hendersonville is in receipt of an application for a conditional zoning district amendment from Carolina Commercial Contractors LLC. The landings of Flat Rock project. Okay, You got it. So the PIN number for this project is 9588-12-4337. The existing zoning and the proposed zoning is going to remain the same at PRD CZD, just because it's a site plan amendment. The zoning will be retained. The total acreage of the site is 8.449 acres. The proposed use is congregate care facility. And the project details is that there's going to be 153 beds in this development. So the applicant is requesting to amend the approved preliminary plan for the CZD. And that is why this modification is being brought to you today. They're requesting to subdivide the property into 2 parcels. The site plan amendment to the conditional zoning district is the only item under review today. Any new condition must be related directly to the proposed amendment. If the property is subdivided into 2 parcels, it will be still considered a single development in accordance with section 7-2 aggregation in the zoning ordinance of Hendersonville. Both parcels will be tied to the approved site plan and approved list of uses and conditions for the total site. So a neighborhood compatibility meeting was held for this project on September 28th. Some of the topics covered were ownership of the property, how will the property be managed, and then also some traffic issues for the property. I will note that that meeting was fairly lightly attended. So the current zoning, parcels to the north are zoned Henderson County Office Institutional. To the east, the parcel is bordered by a large vacant property that was annexed into the city and will likely be developed in the near future. To the south, parcels around the intersection of Upper Road and South Allen Road are zoned Henderson County Regional Commercial, City of Hendersonville C3 Highway Business, City of Hendersonville Planned Residential Development, and they contain commercial uses in the high density manufactured housing development and the Waterleaf at Flat Rock project. Parcels to the east across, or to the west across South Allen are zoned regional commercial, which houses an RV campground, and Henderson County Office Institutional, which houses Four Seasons Hospice and the Elizabeth House. The 2030 Comprehensive Plan's future land use map designates this parcel as Regional Activity Center. Parcels located to the north, east, and south are also designated this. The future land use designation is specifically concentrated in this area due to its proximity to I-26, as intended for community and regional retail services, restaurants, multifamily, residential, and offices. So I won't read, basically this is the same designation as our last project, so I won't read through this. It's priority growth area as well. So the Chapter 8 Land Use and Development promotes compatible infill development. Basically, you should hope to fill in infill areas with compatible uses and traffic patterns. And if that can't be possible, do it through landscaping, buffering, that kind of thing. Like I mentioned earlier, Four Seasons Hospice and the Elizabeth House are right across South Allen from this parcel. So the assisted living and independent living facility will be low traffic, compatible uses to what's across the street. So that's important for that type of sensitive development. And like I also mentioned, it's included in a priority growth area, which are areas that are considered a high priority for expansion of the ETJ, annexation, and extension of infrastructure and services. So this project was annexed into the city, and they will be extending city infrastructure to this parcel. These are some of the existing conditions of the site. The top left picture shows the parcel from across South Allen Road, and the other two kind of just show that it's just a vacant agricultural used property in the past. And the top right shows kind of the tree line where there's a blue line stream in that area, which they will have to buffer from. So site plan. So I'll kind of hit some of the high notes of the approved site plan, and then I'll go into what's changing, what's the modification. So the site plan shows a 32,000 square foot, 58 bed, 1-story assisted living facility. It also shows an 85,000 square foot, 95 bed, 3-story independent living facility. They meet the parking requirements as outlined in the zoning ordinance. The USGS maps show that there's a blue line stream present along the northern boundary of the property. The developer is required to provide a 30-foot stream buffer and a 20-foot transitional zone. Both of these are shown on the site plan. The development will have 2 access points, both off South Allen Road. The applicant will be providing stormwater management plans that will be approved by our engineering department. Sidewalks will be provided along South Allen frontage. The applicant proposed to include a 10-foot type B buffer along the east and southern property lines. The plans also show interior vehicle use landscaping. So the modifications to the site plan, as you can see, there is basically just a parcel line that runs across the property now. The property is proposed to be subdivided into 2 parcels. Parcel 1 is up here at the top with the independent living. It's proposed to be 3.54 acres, and the assisted living parcel to the south is proposed to be 4.53 acres. The developer will have to provide an easement on each side of the property line that will allow maintenance of the porticos for each building. So basically, a maintenance easement along this property line. Something new that was with this parcel or with this project that was not considered during the previous approval was the building height. So the building is proposed to go over 35 feet in height, which requires a height exemption from City Council. I believe the independent living facility is proposed to be 42 feet high as we measure it at the midpoint of the peak. So due to this development falling under section 5-14-6.5, like I mentioned, City Council must grant an exemption from height restrictions. So there's several things that a developer has to do to prove that they can obtain this height exemption. The first is building not block sunlight from adjacent properties between the hours of 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. from the months of October 1st and May 1st. The developer provided the sun study that's presented on your screen. As you can see that the shadows, the darker gray area is not bleeding over any of the property lines, so they will maintain those shadows on their property. The second one has to do with fire access. Our fire department is reviewing these plans as part of the ERC. They did have a few minor comments as far as like placement of a fire hydrant, but nothing that will alter the site. And also the yards, the rear and side yards have to be increased for 1 foot every foot you go up above 35, and they're meeting that requirement with the principal structures. So the proposed site plan was reviewed by our development review committee. The proposed site plan is generally compliant with the zoning code. There is some stuff that will have to be added, some small technical things at final site plan approval. The proposed use and site plan are generally compliant with the comprehensive plan. So staff does not recommend any conditions with this project. Since the modification did not impact trees, the tree board did not review this CCD site plan amendment because there is no change to trees or landscape. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tyler. Any questions? Go ahead.
Is there any design of the sidewalk, what that's supposed to look like?
So sidewalks have to be 5 foot wide, and they have to extend through the drives. I think in accordance with maybe an ADA requirement, but there, as far as like, there is I think the sidewalks have to tie in from the building itself. That's probably currently, I think it's currently only going to be shown from here along the frontage, but connecting it to the buildings, as far as ADA is compliant or concerned, that may be a final site plan.
But on Dana Road, there'll just be a 5 foot sidewalk.
Yeah, so we'll just go from property line to property line. Now granted, the parcel down here to the south of Waterleaf will also be required to build a sidewalk.
So they'll be connecting, getting you further down to Dana, to upward.
Yeah, so hopefully that connection will be made. The project from the last, basically the parcel from the last item is in between those two parcels. So the development of that parcel also plays a role in when that connection will be made, but it's required along all frontages. So at some point, the connection will be made at least to cover this entire parent parcel.
But
Tyler.
all the way to Upward Road.
What's that?
But not all the way to Upward Road.
Right.
That's right. I wanted to clarify
Oh,
that.
yeah, so yeah, sorry, I missed that. Yeah, so they're not asking for a density bonus or anything like that, so it's not going to extend all the way to Upper Road. No.
Yeah.
It's close. It's close. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that, in other words, does each new lot with once subdivided, is the parking requirement met for that building that's on that piece of property?
Yes.
So they're not counting any of the parking spaces on the larger parcel for the smaller parcel?
No, but even if they were, we still consider this one large development, and they'll have to be,
I just didn't want to hiccup.
yeah.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Does the developer want to speak about subdividing?
Planning board members, if you can get a little bit closer to your mic when speaking, it'd be appreciated. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and planning board members. My name is Corey Mabus. I'm with Carolina Commercial Contractors, developer of this track, and also the representative of the ownership group. If you look at this site plan, it's almost the exact same from when we came before y'all last time. The whole purpose of us even coming back before y'all for an amendment is because financing has become tough in the COVID world, and it's a lot easier for us to secure financing to do both tracks separated and individually than it is to do it as one big whole project. So that's the entire reason and purpose for us being here today. And otherwise, we plan on moving forward with this project as is, and we are pursuing construction permits as we speak for this development.
Thank you.
So these could reasonably be built 2, 3, 5 years apart, depending on the vagaries of banking.
I hope not.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Mabus? Thank you, sir. All righty, any discussion, perhaps a motion?
Public comment.
Oh, we've got public comment on this one, right? Thank you, John. Vice Chair. We'll go ahead and open up public comment. If anybody in the room would like to speak, you can come up to the podium. If you're on the Zoom call and would like to speak about this project or subdividing this property, raise your hand and we will unmute you. Nobody on the call?
No hands are raised on Zoom.
We'll go ahead and close public comment then. Any discussion? Perhaps a motion? Go ahead, Neil.
Oh, why not? Yeah, bring the mic up. I remember. I move the planning board recommend that city council adopt an ordinance amending the approved site plan associated with the PRD CCD zoning designation for the subject parcel PIN 9588-12-4337 on the official zoning map of the city of Hendersonville based on the site plan submitted by the applicant. Finding that the amended zoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future land use map, and that the rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. One, this development is within a priority growth area as designated in the comprehensive plan, chapter 8. The property is classified as a development opportunity as designated in the comprehensive plan, chapter 8. And 3, the development provides additional senior housing options for the city of Hendersonville.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Hunter.
Oh, one.
Sorry. Any other discussion?
A quick question.
Go ahead.
There was a height issue. Does that need to be in this, or is that down the road.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be in the motion, so it's tied into the approved site plan, so it's already inside the motion.
Thank you.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, last item on the agenda is a zoning map amendment on Shepherd Street.
Well,
Second to last item on the agenda.
What's that?
we have to revisit the first item.
Oh, right, thank you. Yeah. Do that at the end. Better make myself a note though.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. I'm going to talk to you about a zoning map amendment application that staff is in receipt of. Thanks. Okay, so the applicant is the city of Hendersonville, and I'm going to go ahead and just mention that section 11-6 of the zoning ordinance prohibits an applicant from discussing the specific manner in which they intend to use or develop the property. So going forward, I'm just going to speak to you all about the proposed zoning of C4 neighborhood commercial district throughout the rest of this presentation. So the PIN for this location is 9578-51-3579. It is currently an open vacant 2.1 acre lot that can be accessed from both Shepherd Street and Old Spartanburg Road, and is currently zoned R15 medium density residential, with the proposed zoning being C4 neighborhood commercial zoning district. So the current zoning is R15 medium density residential, which you can see in the green there, is mostly the predominant use in the area. However, C3 highway business and C4 neighborhood commercial are also present, with C3 highway business on the other side of Old Spartanburg Road. And then you have C4 neighborhood commercial, actually is the adjacent parcel to the subject property. I believe is currently being used as a fitness club or gym. You do have one single family home that sits directly on the corner of Old Spartanburg Road and Shepherd Street. Matt's got it right there. And the parcels to the south are zone county's community commercial. And the proposed zoning is C4 neighborhood commercial. The purpose of this zoning district is to provide for the most frequent and daily needs of residents in the immediate neighborhood. The subject property is also located in a transitional area where land uses are transitioning from commercial to residential as you move east from Spartanburg Highway. The subject property also sits within close proximity to the intersection of Old Spartanburg Road and Shepherd Street, and which serves as a node where neighborhood scale commercial uses as well as or compatible public facilities may be located in close proximity to residential uses. So the future land use for this area is designated as high intensity neighborhood. So you can see there that subject property in the surrounding areas, and it's also, close to a neighborhood activity center, which you can see there in designation. So future land use map designations goals are to encourage low maintenance, high density housing that supports neighborhood and regional activity centers and downtown, and provides a transition between commercial and single family development, which we kind of spoke to prior to this, that subject property is located in an area that is transitioning from commercial uses into more residential uses. The location for this for these high intensity neighborhoods are going to be near downtown. Your primary recommended land uses are single family attached and multifamily residential, planned residential developments, open space, with your secondary recommended land uses being public and institutional uses, offices and retail along thoroughfares and recreational amenities, as well as it points out the developmental guidelines, which you can see there. I won't go through, each and every one of those bullet points. Chapter 8's land use and development. This is designated as a priority infill area. The purpose of the infill areas is to encourage infill development and redevelopment in areas planned for high intensity development, which you can see there on the map on 8.3A. Map 8.3B, future land use, also shows that the subject property is in close proximity to an activity node, which an activity node acts as a satellite node that brings the benefit of urban mixed-use development and walkable design to neighborhoods and regional retail centers outside of downtown, while also encouraging a mixing of neighborhood or regional retail with other complementary uses within a 5 to 10 minute walking radius. Here are what are basically the existing conditions of the lot. You can see that mostly it's open and it is open and vacant. You have some existing like site trees along the property line of the adjacent lot. So that where he's got the mouse there, and that is facing southeast from Shepherd Street. And that's pretty much kind of where any type of existing site trees exist, or just kind of right there on that property line there, with everything else being open. The proposed zoning is supported by the comprehensive plan, as the site is as a priority infill area and is also in close proximity to an activity node. The subject property is also adjacent to an existing C4 zoning district, and also allows for the incentivization of infill development, the need for additional opportunities to provide for the frequent and daily needs of the residents in the surrounding neighborhoods in that area. We can open up to questions.
Questions for it's Alexandra, right?
Yes.
Do.
Go ahead, Jim.
Does a government entity have the right to build anything they want, considering if it's for government use?
Public use?
Public, well, it's a government site. This is who the applicant is. So do they need a zoning change to build something they want to build there?
So they can build what's permitted within the zoning district, so C4 zoning district. And I think on the last.
But it's currently zoned R15.
It's currently zoned R15. That is correct.
All right. And as you said, we're not talking about a specific use.
Right.
But the use has been announced publicly previously, and I don't see it on the list. So I'm just kind of curious about that.
So if you will come down here, so under special uses of section 592, you have a use under public utility facilities.
Public utility? What does that mean?
It means you're allowed to build a firehouse.
Public utility
But
sounds
we
like.
can't
So-
consider,
To clarify, well, it is public knowledge, as Mr. Blatt referenced, there's newspaper articles and things that people may be familiar with, but what I will do is read the definition of public utility facilities as defined by our zoning code.
utility to me would mean like.
So any structure or facility transmitting a service provided by a government or public utility, including without limitation, fire stations, emergency medical service centers, telephone and repeater stations, pump substations, and water towers, but not including telecommunication towers, antennas, and other telecommunication devices. I'll also mention that public utility facilities as a special use in the C4 zoning district have supplementary standards. And so there's a set of standards that would have to be met in order to be granted a special use permit. And those are lots must conform to minimum setback and yard requirements of the district in which they are located. Couple things that do not, well, so unstaffed utility structures with internal floor space of less than 600 square feet are exempt from the minimum lot size requirement. So really small utility structures. Electric and gas substations and sewage treatment plants will be separated by a 10-foot type B buffer, meeting the specifications of Article 15 from the street and any abutting residential use or any property located in a residential zoning district. Control houses, pumps, and lift stations and other similar uses shall be screened from the street and any abutting residential use or any property located in a residential zoning district. A fence not easily climbable or comparable safety devices must be installed and maintained in order to deter access to the facility. The design of buildings, structures, and facilities on a site should conform as closely as possible to the character of the area or neighborhood. The facility's lighting shall be shielded to prevent and glare to prevent light and glare spillover onto any adjacent residential properties if such exist. The Board of Adjustment may give relief from these requirements so long as public safety and neighborhood compatibility are protected. If strict adherence would constitute a hardship or is unnecessary. I'll just add that to determine whether a fence is climbable or not, we have Tyler Morrow test that out for us.
So I will mention that this is a rezoning application. That we have to consider all uses within that zoning district when we're rezoning a property. The applicant did not divulge what their intention was, but it has been in the paper, so. But we have to consider everything for rezoning, so it doesn't really matter what the city is intending to do. It sounds like, you know, a rezoning to C4 would allow a sewage treatment plant. I can't imagine a 2-acre sewage treatment plant. I don't think the neighbors would be too happy with that.
Not enough room.
But once it's rezoned, if it's allowed in that zoning district, it does not require any other approval. Is that correct?
If it's a
over
special use,
50,000.
it has to go to the Board of Adjustment.
Unless it's over 50,000 square feet under roof.
If it's over 50,000, it has to go back to the CZD process and a site plan would be required at that time.
Right.
If it's a special use, which there are 6 in
Including
the
public
C4.
utility facilities and fire stations.
That's correct. And restaurants, childcare centers, all those.
It would have to go.
Those require a special use permit, which requires a site plan and a visit to the BOA. And the BOA reviews whether they meet those supplementary standards, an example of which I read for public utility facilities. But each of these 6 would have some type of supplementary standards that would have to be met and reviewed by the BOA and granted.
And that's a quasi judicial process.
Right. Either they meet it or they don't.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Alexander. Does the city have a representative that wants to speak about this rezoning other than the planning staff?
Evening, Chairman and Board. I'm here from the city's administration department, and I can answer any questions you might have on the project.
Name and address, sir.
Adam Murr, 616 Fifth Avenue West or 160 6th Avenue East, Hendersonville, North Carolina. So we purchased this property back in 2019. Obviously, the city being the owner of the property, it has to be for a public use. It meets the criteria. I don't know how specific I can get into the details surrounding the area of the neighborhood that the proposed facility is in. But you'll notice that it is adjacent to a residential property. And I will note that we are planning to negotiate with that residential property owner and ensure the best possible use and situation is made available for that property owner. So are there any questions for me?
Any questions? Okay, thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
We'll go ahead and open up our public comment portion. If you're in the room, would like to speak, come up to the podium, state your name and address. If you're on the Zoom call, you can use the raise your hand feature and we'll unmute you. public comment?
No hands are raised.
No public comments about rezoning on Shepherd. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public comment and have some discussion amongst ourselves here.
Fire department sounds like a good plan.
Yeah. Good use for the land,
You want to live next to it?
hypothetical use.
I don't.
It's great.
But that's, in all fairness, there's several properties around Henderson County that have fire departments right next. They're nominally used, thank God. They're not used seven times a week.
I think they are because they go out on every call.
Every call, yeah. Every
Not
rec.
all of them at one time. So
But I think C4 is very appropriate use for that property regardless.
It's adjacent to a C4 property.
Yeah.
So
C3 across the
kind
street.
of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
if a private person
That's why
came
I
and applied for it, I would find that reasonable. What the city is going to do with it, who knows? They aren't saying.
No, they didn't say. We have a motion.
Okay, we have a motion.
Can you read it?
Can't read it.
You can't. I
It just keeps dumping, my computer just keeps dumping.
Yeah, it's like,
It's the internet.
I move the planning board recommend city council adopt an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city of Hendersonville, changing the zoning designation of the subject property, PIN number 9578513579 from R15 zoning, medium density residential to C4 zoning, neighborhood commercial, a zoning district based on application submitted by the applicant, finding that the rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future land use map designation of high intensity neighborhood, and that the rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. That the map amendment is consistent with the 2030 comprehensive plan, Chapter 8, Land Use and Development, that the rezoning is compatible with the surrounding land uses, that it is reasonable and in the public's interest to approve the application because it will advance goals related to the comprehensive plan.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Any other business?
Back to the first.
Oh, we got to go back to the first one, right? Maybe. Revisit the first one. We have a proposed motion for moving the 600-foot.
I think they forgot to do it.
No, it's just a matter of finding the, where it was safe.
Along 191.
It's not.
Isn't it 6:30 or long?
Okay, we'll get this. Taken care of.
Okay.
So if we had a consent agenda, a lot of these items just pretty much no brainer.
Myself, so I hear.
Well, it's good to get clarity.
Times it needs to be. So
Mhm.
Ooh, this screen over
The bigger one should be there,
there.
yeah.
Should be. Yeah.
I really can't see that very well.
No, that was too small. and This one's too big and close.
We all need one right here.
All right.
There you go. Careful.
Community development. She's not
No money,
No money.
no payoff.
looking for something.
Is that where Lindsay sits?
Yeah, but
He wasn't getting
it in here. Oh, yeah, that's all right.
He was getting into one,
Yeah.
my OneDrive.
Single family. Yeah.
Use.
Well, I imagine that's what it's called.
Maybe he was typing the same time.
I think they typed it up.
Once you get to the city.
Looking where they saved it. I have that problem all the time. Where did I save that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, from there, it's probably right around 2 miles to.
You kind of want to see your
Measures on the back areas.
Right. See where this is. Going here, at least at this panel.
Right.
He knows what city will do.
That's right. No, I agree. I think it's good.
Yeah.
Just. Until it becomes a problem.
Yeah, see it being a problem.
And if someone says, well, then it's too late. You can't regulate.
We don't have gang activity and mods in the rockers.
But it's, he said it was like saying we had an accident on the interstate. This is close.
Okay. Read that one.
Not hardly.
You take a look at the screen there. We've worked up a motion that may reflect some of the discussion we heard earlier this evening on private clubs.
Tamara, can you see it? Okay.
Yeah, do you want me to go for it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I move planning board recommends city council approve an ordinance amending the official zoning ordinance of the city of Hendersonville, article, gosh, I guess that's 16, supplementary standards for certain uses, section -4-20 private clubs, removing all supplementary standards associated with private clubs. Further, that private clubs be reclassified from a special use to a permitted use in the C-1, C-2, C-3, and CMU and I-1 zoning districts. Finding that the zoning text amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan, chapter 4, goal CR-4, and chapter 8, strategy LU-1.1, action LU-1.1.1, and goal LU-10, and that the zoning text amendment is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. 1, it will promote additional entertainment, hospitality, and social experiences within the city of Hendersonville's primary entertainment districts. 2, it encourages reinvestment in the commercial real estate within the city of Hendersonville, supporting a sustainable tax base. And 3, it reflects adaptation by the city to changing market trends in entertainment and hospitality.
Second.
Well put. So we have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any discussion?
I trust the city on wordsmithing.
There we go.
Good job, guys.
So if we left it as a special use and just took away the distance restrictions, it would still have to go before the Board of Adjustments?
Yeah, the only standard would be the lighting,
Right.
which it was vague at best. I mean, it is vague at best, and so is our other lighting requirements. That's why we're in the process of working on the lighting ordinance as it is.
Okay. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, well, there is no other business that I know of
Move to adjourn.
earlier.
We did
I
it
think we
earlier.
did. Did we do public comment on that
You don't have to do
earlier?
it
We
again
did.
with this new stuff.
All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second approved.
1 minute to
Debatable.
the 2-hour limit.
How about that? How about that?